It is Friday, July 16th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone. As per usual, here's your PS Plus reminder for the month of July. The games are available right now. Make sure you grab these before they go away. And, well, this past week was relatively quiet in the world of PlayStation. Not really a whole lot going on, but, you know, we always have some things to catch up on here, like, for example, our first news story, which is about Death Stranding Director's Cut. This is one game where, when it was announced during Jeff Keighley's Summer Game Fest, we were expecting it, but we weren't really expecting the name of it. That was something where a lot of us were caught off guard, just because in the context of a game, or at least this game and also now Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, it doesn't really fit appropriately all that well, and it looks like Hideo Kojima also agrees. So he was actually very candid about this over on Twitter, where he says, and I quote, "A director's cut in a movie is an additional edit to a shortened version that was either released reluctantly because the director did not have the right to edit it, or because the running time had to be shortened. In the game, it is not what was cut, but what was additionally produced that was included. Director's plus? So, in my opinion, I don't like to call it director's cut." And that is what a director's cut would normally mean if we're talking about movies where that phrase is traditionally used. Of course, directors have a much different role in games versus how they approach movies. And then also games have a lot of cut content that will never see the light of day ever again. Sometimes it comes back, but for the most part, publishers and developers, if they have a post-launch roadmap, they outline that ahead of time of, okay, here's what we're going to do after the game ships, and that could be cosmetics, expanded levels, story content, new environments, or whatever. And then, that stuff is released in the short term on the storefronts. Long term, you have a more complete package come out where that's named Complete Edition, Definitive Edition, something like that, of course. So with this director's cut, while it's silly in practice, it's quite fitting for how PlayStation has been approaching their titles nowadays with that PS Studios logo entry. Now you've got director's cut, which we've never seen being used within the context of games, but again, it fits quite well with how Sony's been approaching this stuff lately. And also, I think they're just kind of this is really a good way for them to have their cake and eat it too, in terms of how these games live on the market nowadays, where they're kind of sidestepping that whole releasing content on the store first and then doing a complete package. Now they're just kind of doing this all in one, where it's like, here's a $50 to $70 game, and if you're an existing owner, you can just pay that difference on the store and continue using your disc or your current digital license, right? You can upgrade it from there. So that's probably how they're just going to keep approaching it moving forward. Anyway, moving on to our next story. This September is the 25th anniversary for the Persona franchise, and Atlus has outlined 7 announcements that they'll be making throughout the next year, with the first one being this September, and one of these is Persona 6. It's pretty much guaranteed at this point. Not to say that it's going to get announced soon. Maybe it'll be, next year, but Persona 6 is coming, which they've actually said they're trying to make this game bigger and better than 5. I would love to see how they're going to make that happen, because 5's already a 100-hour game at minimum before you're even doing a lot of the extra stuff. But either way, there's that. The other 6 projects are kind of wild cards for this franchise, because it could be anime, it could be a bunch of spin-off games, it could be another dancing game, it could be who knows, right? But the point is, because there's not really a particular PlayStation spin on this just yet, it's the matter of, well, this franchise is somewhat synonymous with PlayStation, and based on what Sony's been doing lately, and also Atlus realizing just how big this franchise is now getting, I would be shocked if Sony wasn't in some way, shape, or form really trying to get in bed with Atlus, just based off of what we've been seeing, right? So not only has Sony gotten very close with Square on the Final Fantasy franchise, but also Forspoken. We've got a number of other, third parties that they've approached for either marketing rights or timed exclusivity. Not only is PlayStation getting more aggressive in securing these deals, but you also have Sega and Atlus being completely aware of what this franchise can do nowadays and how much reach it has versus what it did, 10 plus years ago, where Persona 4 was on PS2 in 2008, into the PS3 and 360 life cycle. That's a small audience. Then Persona 4 was on Vita for a long time, up until recent years, where Atlus is now seeing how well Golden did on Steam, Persona 5 being their most successful entry, and then Royal, and then the dancing game, Strikers. So they would have more leverage in what they want to do with this franchise, and considering Sony has been very aggressive with securing deals, it feels like it would be an opportunity that they it almost makes sense, right, to secure that synonymous relationship. If they're doing that with something like Final Fantasy, I can't see why they wouldn't want to do it with Persona. But we'll see how that where this goes. Now, while we're talking about Sony's third-party deals, one of the games that they signed on was Ghostwire Tokyo, and unsurprisingly, this past week, we got our confirmation that this game was delayed to early 2022, which I think the writing was on the wall for this one. Now, it was expected this year, but we had very few development updates. We only had one trailer, so much like a lot of projects that have been delayed lately, the cited reason here was the team's safety, and perhaps there's also other development troubles going on. I would hope that there's less of that and probably more of the team just needing more time based off of their workflow pipeline that they're now set up with after the pandemic, and really during the pandemic. We're still, in the middle of this thing, basically. But we did have a release date window for this game come out accidentally a few months ago when we had that PS5 montage trailer where it showcased a bunch of upcoming software, and towards the bottom of the screen we had a release date window for a lot of games, and for Ghostwire it was October 2021, and that seemed encouraging, but again, we just didn't really have much going on for this game, and so like all the other titles that have been delayed, this is one of them. I hope it is okay though, and I hope it does release on time and it comes out good. I mean, between this and also Deathloop, because I think both these games are kind of going hand in hand based on the situation that they found themselves in. Between these two, I was really looking forward to Ghostwire, so I hope it turns out okay. Now, another game that was included in that PS5 release window trailer mix-up thing was Gran Turismo 7, and we know that game has also been delayed. However, the folks over on GT Planet have noticed that on the Experience PlayStation web portal, which is a site where you can, log in with your PSN ID, complete a bunch of small tasks, and then get free themes or beta codes or whatever kind of digital goods that the portal is set up for. But there's something in there actually for Gran Turismo where if you watch a 10-second clip of the last Gran Turismo 7 trailer, you could get a beta code for a PS5 GT7 beta, presumably. It spits out a code that doesn't actually work because this isn't official info that Sony's outlined whatsoever, right? So technically this is more of an official thing that possibly slipped up, or it's too much. There's too much on the site there for this to not be a thing. It's just a matter of if Sony's going to follow through with actually holding a beta, because clearly the game does need more time, but it was slated for this year. So while Gran Turismo is always a franchise that we wait a long time for, or at least the past 2-3 entries, it's been taking very long to come out. This is an entry where we're expecting it sooner rather than later, so maybe it makes more sense to actually hold the beta for this game, where it is close enough to release to where there are certain tweaks and things that can be made prior to it actually coming out, and if they do have more time, then a beta would be very appropriate. And it's actually worth pointing out too that it looks like there was a leak of a potential tie-in of official Gran Turismo accessories, which would be compatible on PS4 and PS5. So if there is definitely an accessory push and a beta that's that's on the horizon, again, we're expecting this game sooner rather than 3 years down the road, right? We're so used to that with Gran Turismo. It's not going to be the case this time around, so it is coming, but I'm guessing Sony's definitely going to have a pretty meaningful update for us before the end of the year at a minimum. Now, moving on to our next story, we have what appears to be a very small but encouraging update on what could be, or what we're assuming is the next Spider-Man entry. So Najee Jeter, who plays as Miles Morales, posted this picture on his personal Instagram where it shows him in the full mocap suit, and the description that he wrote was not all too revealing. However, the comments, fans were speculating right away that it's for the next Spider-Man. He took the post down, which you kind of expect, because when you're at work and you're in the mocap suit, you're not really allowed to take pictures and post them online. So it's just something where, given the circumstance, it's probably the next Spider-Man, especially if you played the last one and the first game. That going forward, we're expecting Peter and Miles to play a pretty large role here, and I'm going to also assume that we've got a tentative release schedule, or they do rather, of probably mid to late 2023. So we'll see the game before that, of course, just that it'll still be quite a while until the game's actually done and ready to go. So for now, at least, we have this, and it's good to see that the game is more than likely well underway. For our next story, we have an update on the Blue Box Game Studios situation, if we can call it that. Before, we were waiting on that real-time trailer to release or the real-time trailer application to release in late June. Didn't happen, delayed to August. It's mid-July now, and our update is that the application will be available for preload for PS5 owners on July 29th, and August 10th is when we'll have some sort of introduction that's released in the application, and then later in August is when we'll see more content of some kind and what can we expect. Blue Box outlined this on their Twitter account where, well, first off, it was renamed from Real-Time Trailers to Real-Time Experience. And we can expect multiple trailers between a duration of 5 minutes to 12 minutes, gameplay demonstrations, and also future live events, which seems pretty weird. I mean, the whole thing was already strange, right? Because this specialized application that runs in real time, and part of that is, like, for example, you can feel DualSense features, which is definitely cool, right? But it's not typical. It's been done before, but we almost never see this stuff nowadays. In fact, for most developers and publishers, when it comes to a simple deadline for getting a trailer ready to go for, like, let's say E3, Gamescom, TGS, even that is kind of a huge pain to put together. So for this, where we're getting 5 to 12 minute trailers, it's all running in real time. It's an experience application. There's an introduction. Now there's live events that are getting thrown into the mix. This is a lot of resources, and I would imagine a lot of work just to what is largely a free experience to people before the game's even properly conveyed to people or even sold or even monetized. I mean, this is most developers would not go through this much to do you know what I mean? It's another very strange thing where before I was like, oh, I feel like maybe there's more Sony involvement than we're led to believe, or the project's larger than we're led to believe. I never bought the Kojima thing, but it's just, there's always been something strange around this. Now I'm thinking, oh, maybe it really is just a very small team that's doing a lot of outsourcing work, and they're over-promising, and they're clearly going to under-deliver, but they've got so many eyes on them already to where it's probably going to work out good for them, maybe. I mean, it's so strange. So we'll keep watching it, of course, because this has been one of the most interesting things to happen this year. So hopefully some interesting things will come out of this preload, and then also the introduction phase, which again, that should be available August 10th, and hopefully they'll stick to all these timelines this time as well. Next up for Gamescom 2021 and for Jeff Keighley's opening night live, unsurprisingly, this is going to be a digital-only showcase this year, no in-person event. It will run from August 25th to the 27th, and we recently got confirmation of the partners that will be a part of this showcase, which it's the usual suspects, right? Activision, EA, Bandai Namco, even Microsoft, Sega. But who's missing in that list? Of course, it's Sony Interactive Entertainment, because at this point we know they're not a part of E3, Gamescom. They haven't done something like TGS in years, actually, in a big way at least, where that was even prior to when they stopped going to E3, right? So it's been said before, but we can't look at these shows anymore and expect a major Sony showcase or even a major announcement, although it is something where we can still watch it and go, okay, there's third-party stuff. We might see some of those indies that Sony showcased on their show. They could still be there. Sony will have marketing rights for a lot of games, and also we still saw some PS Studio titles pop up here and there as minor updates, right? So like during Summer Game Fest where we saw Death Stranding. So these things are still very possible, but when it comes to the recent state of play where people are like, okay, well that was kind of bogus, now let's look at maybe August or September for that hour-plus long showcase that everybody really, really wants. We can't think that that's going to be associated with things like Gamescom or any of these more traditional events, right? So, unsurprisingly, Sony's not going to be at Gamescom, and we're going to have to still wait for the company to be a little more transparent on what they plan to do, which it's going to be up to them to actually just drop that news on the PS blog and Twitter like they like to do nowadays. Now, speaking of events and TGS, like we just mentioned, we did also get a not-so-great update on Final Fantasy XVI, which is that the game will not be a part of TGS 2021. The game's producer, Naoki Yoshida, did confirm, do not expect this game at TGS. It's not going to be there. And before, we were thinking, okay, FF16 is going to be at Square's E3. And if it wasn't, that was actually a bit encouraging because we thought, all right, well then, that means they might be saving it for Sony's State of Play or Showcase or whatever they were thinking of possibly doing, because Sony's very close to that franchise right now and there's a deal in place, so they might want to show it again on their terms and not necessarily Square's. But it looks like that's not going to be the case for at least until past September, which is when TGS 2021 takes place. Although at the very least we did get a minor update in that the English voice recording is almost done, so that's nice to hear. I mean, the one thing that we can always say about this game in particular, and it's kind of like Gran Turismo 7, where normally this is an IP where we think, okay, it's going to be a long time before it actually comes out because that's just what we've seen before. But at least for Gran Turismo 7 and Final Fantasy 16, where The first trailers looked great, and they provided a lot of development updates very quickly. The game's probably further along than we're really giving it credit for, and so if we don't get an update by the end of this year, we'll probably see a pretty meaningful one within the first quarter of 2022. Moving on to our next news story, the Sony Interactive Entertainment president and CEO, Jim Ryan, was recently doing an interview with the Chinese publication TNT Post, and he gave a lot of pretty good answers regarding the PS business. Kind of things that we expect, so nothing all too revealing. However, there is one question in there where a lot of publications have really zeroed in on it and taken just a handful of things out of there. And the problem is it's out of context, but also there is some translation, not issues, but you definitely lose some nuance and exactness of what the point he's trying to get across here. So we're going to go over the whole thing, but the question to start off is, many studios may spend a lot of time developing a game. As the company's leadership, how to keep your patience? This is a very good question. I think this is similar to a previous question, that is, what is the importance of PlayStation Studios, especially their ability to develop games and demonstrate platform advantages? Therefore, people like me need to keep those two things in mind and realize that it is better to wait and have a great game than to rush and have a game that is okay or quite good. Players only remember best games rather than okay games. If it is a best game, players may want a sequel, and they will also want to buy a sequel, but no one really cares about a game that is only okay. Of course, due to financial and product portfolio considerations, we will also give pressure to studios to deliver a certain product within the expected time, but in general, we don't want products that are okay, we want the best. So what's problematic about this is that certain places we're cherry picking out certain sentences like players only remember the best games, or no one really cares about a game that is only okay, and this goes into what's been such an issue nowadays with people not clicking into headlines and reading the full story, or only reading a small quote, or this answer in particular is quite long, and I think there's a lot of nuance that's been lost on the translation here, but really combine all that stuff with the fact that people, generally speaking, seem to really dislike things that Jim Ryan has to say, and it seems like no matter what he says, it's probably going to come off as kind of a negative or pompous sort of reactionary response. It just seems like that's kind of like a lose-lose scenario here. Really, it seems like a par for the course answer when it comes to, hey, we make these games and we want them to be really good, more or less, right? It's I don't know. I think some are looking a little too much into this. It's really a guy saying we want our products to be good. But also it's just something where he's not necessarily saying people don't remember bad games too, because really there are plenty of disaster projects out there that some will never forget. But kind of a mediocre game that you maybe play for a few hours and then drop it and don't think about it ever again, or maybe you play it to completion, years go by and then you forget about it, right? I mean, that's kind of what he's probably getting at. That's what I mean by I think the nuance is lost here and you can't really hear the words that he's saying. In later answers, he does explain about what a best game looks like to him, which is a game that invokes emotion and some kind of response out of the person, whether that's sadness, anger, happiness, a level of excitement that you don't get from every single project that's out there. And for a lot of PlayStation Studio games, they do deliver, and that's what he wants to keep doing. So again, I think it's a pretty standard affair answer, to be honest. Next up, there's been a recent report out of the Japan Times about the Nintendo Switch OLED model and its pricing strategy and how that might actually influence the rest of the market, to see how much the market is willing to bear when it comes to paying for what is a price increase on kind of a very marginal update to the hardware, right? I mean, for the OLED Switch model, it is a better screen pound for pound. There's no denying that, really, but it's one where many are arguing and definitely feel like it's not worth the $50 price increase. And this is not very typical when it comes to console life cycles. We almost always see hardware price cut over time, right? And actually they do get better as well, where it's marginal updates, but still nice updates at a cheaper price. You get a smaller form factor, you get more power efficient boxes, you get maybe some games bundled in, maybe an extra controller. We always see bundles being priced lower and more favorably over time in a console life cycle, whereas with Nintendo, they're on year 4 with Switch, and they've got a price increase for a model with a very minor update. And this is something where an analyst is arguing that a lot of the market is going to be watching this, and also platform holders like Sony will be watching this closely. And actually they do cite that they have a source at the PlayStation division that is watching the market response to the OLED model for the Switch and seeing how that plays out. And what I gather from this is basically how Sony might approach this moving forward. And really, again, everybody's kind of watching what might happen here with how well Nintendo does with this thing. But if we always see prices go down with console life cycles, maybe that won't be the case this time around, where Sony and maybe even Microsoft, who knows, they have been the most consumer friendly this time around, and I don't really expect them to do these things. With PlayStation, though, it could be something where, like, say, PS4 Pro, right, that came out at the same price tag as PS4 in 2013, maybe some sort of marginal update to PS5 where it's the expected slim console, maybe a PS5 Pro, although that doesn't seem all too likely. But maybe when these machines come out, they'll still be priced at the same or maybe even a little bit higher, which would be insane to think about. I think we're really just looking at a box that might have a stagnant price and might not actually ever increase in the expected timetable that we're used to, where it's like after a year and a half, 2 years, you see a price cut. But I mean, really, if the demand is this high during year one and we're already very close to year two, I can't see that happening anytime soon, because they still can't even meet demand to begin with. And if they can sell a box at $400 to $500 and then release a different form factor, which they're actually evaluating a 6nm process, I mean, obviously the price to manufacture PS5 has already gone down to where they're going to be earning a profit on it. I mean, I don't know. I can see Sony doing it, though, because considering they're doing $70 games, you know, charging upgrade fees for some of their games, and keep in mind, a lot of publishers are doing this, and it's not really a foreign concept to expect that Sony, but also everybody's watching the market response to this OLED Switch and seeing what the market can bear. And if the market can bear paying higher prices, you know, everybody's going to start eating, and that's unfortunately, that is business. So we'll see in the coming years. Next up, Xbox head Phil Spencer was recently on the Kind of Funny Games cast, and really good conversation, a lot of interesting things that were talked about. But one thing that he brought up again was the DualSense, and this is not the first time where he's actually had some nice words to say about the work that Sony's done on their controller, and it almost sounds like the company at this point is really evaluating things that they might want to go do on their own controller. So Phil was quoted saying, "We're definitely thinking about different kinds of devices that can bring more games to more places. There's probably some more work that we'll do on the controller. I think Sony's done a nice job with their controller, and we kind of look at some of that and think there are things that we should go do. But we're probably not in the more bespoke accessories place right now. We just look at what happens on Windows and other places and see if there's a unique opportunity for us. Right now, I don't think there's anything that's obvious to me." So while it's not an outright confirmation that they're seriously considering haptics or the adaptive triggers, it's something where I'm sure they are heavily considering it or looking at it, or something where when they think about what year 2 or year 3 of Xbox looks like, if they're thinking about doing a minor update to the controller, or in this case what would be a more substantial update to the base controller that is shipped with every single console, or perhaps a feature reserved to another Elite series, or maybe a different accessory entirely different like he's talking about, where it's bespoke to trying to reach a large amount of consumers. Whatever the case may be, it's like we said the last time he complimented the DualSense, where it's a fantastic controller. I love it. A lot of people do. The haptics and the triggers work great for certain games, but developers on other titles, not so much. In fact, we're seeing some games, some of those third-party games, they're patching them to improve those DualSense features, because when they're done well, I mean, it really adds to that experience. And so if you have a competing platform offering the same features, you've got more incentive from a third party to implement it versus what we're in right now, where first party, of course, is naturally doing the best with it, and then you've got a lot of these third parties where you're seeing some half-hearted attempts. But if the features are available on more than one platform, there is an incentive to make sure that it works well across the board. So that would be a good thing. And if they are considering it, let's hope they follow through. Moving on, we've got yet another casting update for The Last of Us HBO TV series, which, remember, right now it's currently filming, so that's good. Still going to be a while until we see how this turns out, but for right now, we found out about 3 new actors that were recently casted, which is Jeffrey Pierce, who he actually voiced Tommy in the game. Now, he's not going to play as Tommy, but instead he's playing as somebody named Perry, who is another survivor. We'll see how he fits in. And then there's Con O'Neill. He'll take on the role of Bill. Bill, we see at the starting midpoint of the game, he locks down that entire town, and he's living alone, and he's super anxious and paranoid. And then there's Murray Bartlett. He's playing as Bill's partner, Frank, and this is the portion of the game where we get a lot of not direct cues, but pretty obvious cues that Frank is Bill's partner, and it's not, we don't ever see Frank. This is one portion of the game where I think a lot of people wanted this to be explored further, and at least for the show, it's good to see that this is probably what we're going to be getting, right? Between this arc and then also Henry and Sam later on, that'll be very interesting, right? This is where the show can play to a TV show's strengths. You know, we can watch more relationships build and form versus, you know, the game where it does have to center around a lot of gameplay and action-oriented sequences. It's like how Neil discussed it before. They're certainly going to play to the strengths of what a TV show can do. So we'll probably see that arc play out in a very interesting way. So I'm getting more interested and enthusiastic about the show. It's something where, for me, I don't watch a whole lot of television, or at least not serious television like HBO, you know, long-running shows and things like that. It's just not really my thing. I watch a lot of like either comedy or true crime or something that's short, sweet, funny, or interesting. I don't normally watch, you know, dramas or anything like that, but I do want to give this a chance when it comes out, and that's not, for me at least, that's saying a lot. Now, with all that said, it is time to get to Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter. If you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very easy. Follow the link down below. Supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are some of the stories that I want to talk about with you all from this past week. Our Tuesday video was another random eBay lot unboxing. Finally found another one, some PS2 games for about $230 something. Like I said before, those videos are going to be spaced out further and further just because I always try to buy from a new seller so they don't come up too frequently. But actually next month we'll probably do another opening of some of my recent pickups because I've had like 2 months now of games stockpiling for those videos now when we do them, and I've got some interesting buys in there, so that's probably coming up next. And then this coming Tuesday, as always, another upload is planned. Can't tell you about it just yet, but something will be there. And that's it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Panecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.